The universe hides secrets that no human mind was meant to comprehend. And each of the 3 stories you're about to hear is an account of someone who touched one of those secrets and discovered that the price for gazing into the abyss is that the abyss gazes back into you. I have always known that the fragile crust of our reality rests upon an abyss of unimaginable horrors, a secret that my profession as an archaeologist constantly threatened to uncover. The discovery in the Green Mountains of Vermont, deep within a cave near the town of Stowe, was not an exception, but the terrible confirmation of all my nightmares. The mouth of the cave resembled a petrified throat gaping open at the sky, a dark fissure that seemed to swallow the daylight and spew darkness. The team, comprised of Dr. Edward, a man from Albuquerque whose skepticism was as solid as the rocks he studied, Professor Florence, from Savannah, whose curiosity outweighed her caution, and myself, crossed that threshold with the foolish pretension of unraveling a geological mystery. What we found was the grave of a murderous god, and an invitation to inherit its legacy of cosmic blood. The first clues were fragments of a pottery or bone that resembled nothing known, black as the absolute vacuum and cold to the touch in a way that sucked the heat from one's hand. As we penetrated deeper into the darkness, our lanterns revealed walls covered in carvings that hurt the eyes, non-Euclidean geometric patterns that twisted and flowed, silently narrating stories of annihilation in a language of pure form. The air was heavy, stagnant for eons, and laden with the weight of a memory that was not our own. In the great central chamber, the sight that presented itself stole the breath from all of us. There it was, the incultus predator, as Edward would later name it with a terribly naive academicism. It was not a fossil in the conventional sense, but a statue of flesh and bone turned to mineral, a chimera of elongated limbs and inverted joints, bent over a console of similar matter, its appendages ending in natural blades that reflected our light with a hungry gleam. The creature had been dead for countless millennia, but its posture was one of absolute dominance, of a predator that knew itself to be the apex of an entire food chain spanning galaxies. Florence was the first to notice the crystal shards. Arranged in niches around the chamber, they were translucent and thin as gauze, emitting an almost imperceptible phosphorescent pulsation. Against Edward's cautious protests, she touched one. Her body rigidified instantly. Her eyes widened, glazed, and a trickle of saliva dripped from the corner of her mouth without her notice. When she pulled her hand back, trembling, she did not cry or scream. She whispered of falling constellations and a silence that sang. The temptation was too great. One by one, we yielded. Upon making contact with the smooth, icy surface of the crystal, my mind was invaded. It was not communication, but drowning. Images of iridescent worlds being consumed by a moving blackness, of colossal creatures, entities that inhabit humanity's darkest myths, being systematically hunted, torn apart, and catalogued as trophies. I saw the ruin of Relia not as a tragedy, but as a successful hunting operation. The Yith, as I learned they called themselves, were not victims. They were the cosmos's definitive butchers, architects of a genocide of ineffable proportions. Their science was that of annihilation, their art that of extinction. The initial euphoria of the discovery quickly turned into a deep cold that settled in the soul. We realized that place was not a mausoleum. It was an arsenal, a school. The Yith, foreseeing their eventual fall, had seeded the universe with time capsules like that one, intellectual traps designed to recruit the next species ambitious enough to pick up the torch of extermination. The consoles were not mere historical records, but interfaces for actual devices, star charts plotting routes to the lairs of creatures slumbering on distant moons and in the abyssal trenches of Earth, and instructions for activating the keys that would free them, not to worship them, but to hunt them. Professor Florence, the most sensitive among us, was the first to comprehend the abomination we represented in that place. With frantic determination, she grabbed a pickaxe and charged the main console, a cry of revolt echoing in the chamber. The tool's metal did not even scratch the alien surface, but Dr. Edwards' reaction was immediate and violent. He did not push her. He brandished one of the Yith devices, a small orb of ebony we had found near the crystals. A shadow, denser than the surrounding darkness, detached from the object and enveloped Florence. There was no scream, only a muffled sound of fabric being unraveled. She disintegrated before our eyes. Her particles dissolved and absorbed by that living shadow, which then quietly withdrew back into the orb. The horror of the scene was overshadowed by the look in Edward's eyes. There was no remorse or fear in them, only an avaricious fascination, a gleam of understanding and acceptance. He had embraced the call. He was no longer my colleague. He was an apostle of genocidal ghosts. The escape from the cave was a blur of blind panic. I left behind Edward and his new god of death, ran through the black woods of Stowe, every shadow seeming like an extension of the thing that had consumed Florence. The branches scratched my skin like claws, and the wind whispered promises in forgotten tongues. I found my car and drove for hours, aimlessly, until exhaustion overcame me on a back road near Burlington. It was only then that I realized I was not alone. In the pocket of my jacket, one of the crystal shards, smaller than my palm, had lodged itself. I had picked it up without thinking, perhaps moved by a perverted archaeological instinct, or perhaps because it itself wished to be taken. It now rests on my desk, here in my apartment in Boston, far from those cursed mountains, but never far from its whisper. It whispers to me incessantly, no longer through touch, but through a constant mental presence, a background noise in my consciousness that turns into vivid images when I lower my guard. It shows me the map to Titan, moon of Saturn, where a thing that is a single eye surrounded by a corona of tentacles sleeps under an ocean of methane. It shows me the exact location of a key, a flute carved from a bone that is from no earthly animal, buried on a deserted beach near Monterey. It instructs me on how to use it to sing the creature awake. And the most insidious aspect, the part that truly terrifies my soul, is that a part of me, a seed planted by the shard, begins to find the vision not terrifying, but sublime. It finds the idea of such power, of switching sides in the cosmic equation, of being the hunter and never again the prey, deeply, horribly seductive. This is how they recruit. They do not appeal to our malice, but to our fear. They offer the ultimate weapon so we never need to fear again. And I fear. I fear for myself, for I feel my resistance wane with every sleepless night, the whisper becoming more and more a familiar, almost friendly voice in my mind. And I fear for you. Yes, you listening to this recording, comfortably in your home, perhaps in Portland or in Austin, thinking this is just another story, a fictional narrative to send a shiver down your spine on a rainy night. But I know, with a certainty that eats away at my insides, that the whisper did not stop with me. The Yitha's communication does not depend solely on physical touch. The shard emits a frequency of temptation, a conceptual poison that impregnates the very narrative of the events. As you listen to my story, as you concentrate on the words describing the horrors I witnessed, you tune your mind to this frequency. That sudden thought of cruelty you attribute to the day's stress, that strange dream of green stars and impossible geometries you forget upon waking, the passing fascination with a void deeper than the ocean. They are not yours. They are theirs. It is the call. It is the bait being set in your soul. They do not need ships or armies. They need only an idea, a promise of absolute power planted in the fertile ground of primal fear. And the universe is full of fertile ground. The Yith knew that the greatest weapon is not terror, but the cure for terror that they offer. The promise that we will never again be small or frightened. All we need to do is turn the key, open the door, release the quarry, and join the eternal hunt. The shard on the desk emits a dull glow, and the star chart is engraved behind my eyes. I know the way. I feel with each passing day the will to resist diminishing, replaced by a horrifying curiosity, a sick need to see, to witness, to participate. And I know, with a final and terrifying certainty, that soon, very soon, I will grab a shovel. I will travel to Monterey. I will unearth the flute. And I will play the song that will wake the world from its ignorant sleep. The danger was never the bones in the cave. The danger is what they do to the minds of those who find them. The danger is the invitation. I believe I will accept it. And perhaps, when you hear of strange events on the California coast, of sounds that should not exist echoing over the waves, you will remember this story and realize, too late, that it was not just a story. It was a warning and an invitation. I have always believed the universe was governed by a superior logic, a divine and unreachable mathematics that dictated every event, from the fall of a leaf to the explosion of a supernova. My life was dedicated to unraveling this underlying order, to finding the primordial equation that would unify all phenomena, chaotic or not. I, a simple mathematics professor in Cambridge, spent sleepless nights in my modest apartment, surrounded by stacks of books and blackboards covered in symbols that, to anyone else, would look like the scribbles of a madman. The search was my obsession, my only purpose, and it consumed me in a way I did not even recognize as dangerous. Until, one stormy night, with the sound of rain beating against the window like a frantic drum, it revealed itself to me. It was not a moment of illumination, but of surrender. The final equation, the key to everything, emerged not as a discovery, but as an imposition. The symbols organized themselves in my mind, a sequence of numbers and operators that did not follow conventional logic, but a tortuous and deeply unnatural geometry. I wrote it on the board with trembling hands, and even looking at those absurd glyphs, I knew, with a certainty that came from my core, that it worked. It did not describe reality, it commanded it. The first test was trivial, almost a joke. The equation, when solved for a specific set of variables, predicted the exact number of raindrops that would hit my window in the next minute. The second test was about where my cat, a Siamese named Boris, would hide during a thunderclap. The accuracy was terrifying, perfect, divine. The temptation was too great for an ordinary man like me. Slowly, my search for transcendental knowledge gave way to a petty, human ambition. I used the equation to predict lottery numbers, football game outcomes, minute fluctuations in the stock market. Wealth arrived silently, without fanfare. I moved to a penthouse in New York City, but the blackboards came with me, now surrounded by luxury, but still stained with the same blasphemous writing. I avoided traffic accidents with a margin of seconds, knew exactly what to say to persuade anyone, foresaw every little inconvenience in life. The equation was my lens to a perfectly ordered universe, and I felt like a minor god, a conductor of the symphony of causality. But every symphony needs a lead instrument, and all order has a price. The first time I perceived the cost was after avoiding a hit-and-run that would have killed me on a New York avenue. Returning home, euphoric, I found the equation still etched on the board, and noticed, with a sudden chill down my spine, that its lines seemed darker, more defined, as if recently retraced with a new material. And there was a new element, a small geometric diagram beside it, a pattern of lines intersecting at impossible angles, resembling a crystal or a snowflake from an insane dimension. That very night, a brief news segment spoke of a man stabbed in a mugging at the exact location where I had avoided the accident. His body found arranged in a strangely rigid manner. The connection was impossible, but the equation demanded it. The truth, slowly and horribly, began to dawn on me. The equation did not predict the future. It wrote it. It was not a tool of observation, but of creation. And to force reality to bend to its will, to impose a specific sequence of events in a sea of chaotic probabilities, it needed an injection of energy, an anchor of cruel and primordial meaning. It needed blood. And not just any blood, but blood spilled in specific geometric patterns, offered as a sacrifice to the cold, hungry logic that governed it. The horror did not stop me. The obsession had already sunk roots too deep into my soul. I convinced myself they were coincidences, that my exhausted mind was inventing mystical connections. I continued to use the equation, now for increasingly complex things, to shape the world around me with surgical precision. And after each use, the geometric diagram next to the equation appeared, more complex and sharper, and invariably, in the hours or days that followed, a horrible and inexplicable death was reported in the vicinity, the victim found with their limbs arranged at angles that mirrored the pattern of the diagram. A body in a Chicago alley, organized in a golden spiral, another on a California beach, arranged like a precise fractal in the sand. I was the architect of these deaths, each use of the equation a decree of execution for a stranger. The entity behind it all began to make its presence known. Not as a physical form, but as a pressure in my mind, a cold, geometric consciousness that watched my calculations. I felt its hunger, an ancient and abstract hunger for order, for clean, defined patterns, being sated by the chaos of human death. The equation was a prayer, and I, its unwilling priest, offering sacrifices to a god of pure logic, a god for whom life was merely a variable to be rearranged or eliminated to achieve an elegant result. And then came the event that shattered what remained of my sanity. I desired something grand, something that would cement my power once and for all. I used the equation to ensure a bill that greatly benefited me would pass in Congress, an event of incalculably low probability. The calculation was the most complex I had ever performed, requiring hours of intense, concentrated work. When I finished, the board was covered in an intricate web of symbols and, at its center, a diagram so complex it hurt to look at, a mandala of mathematical horror. The next morning, the news was splashed across every paper. A terrible bus accident in Washington, D.C., with dozens of victims. The satellite photos of the site, shown on a news website, made my blood run cold. The position of the destroyed vehicles, the bodies covered by sheets on the asphalt, everything formed a precise pattern, a macabre, large-scale reproduction of the diagram I had drawn on the blackboard. I had not just killed one person, I had orchestrated a massacre to feed that thing's hunger. Now, it is always with me. I feel its constant presence, a silhouette of pure mathematics in the periphery of my vision, a whisper of numbers replacing my thoughts. I know I am no longer a user of the equation, I am its instrument. It uses me, and its hunger is insatiable. And I continue to calculate, because the obsession won't release me, because the horrible beauty of that perfect logic is all I have left. And this is where I need you to understand, you who are listening to this recording with skepticism, perhaps doubting, perhaps attributing my story to madness. You think this is just a tale, a narrative to send chills down your spine. But I know, with the same certainty that I know 2 + 2 = 4, that the entity is no longer contained within my reality alone. By listening to my story, by visualizing the patterns I described, by trying to comprehend the logic behind the horror, you are, even infinitesimally, performing the same calculation. You are opening a small crack in your own reality, allowing a fragment of that geometry of blood to manifest. A recurring nightmare with angular shapes, a coincidence too strange to be casual in your daily life, a drawing your child made that looks frighteningly familiar. Do not ignore these signs. They are the echo of the equation, and the thing that feeds on it is attracted to echoes. The horror is not in random death, but in the order imposed by death. And this order, once awakened, cannot be undone. It only seeks to expand, to find new calculations, new priests. Beware the patterns you seek. Beware the order you desire. You might end up being the next variable in an equation you don't even know you are solving. I have always believed that the void between the stars hid more secrets than wonders, a truth that my profession as a space rescue officer has confirmed time and again. We navigated the commercial routes near the Armstrong transfer orbit, our ship, the Vigil, responding to calls from freighters with fried engines and stations with air leaks, monotonous tasks that constituted the reality of our work. Until the signal came, weak, distorted, but unmistakable, the standard distress code, yet modulated by an ancient transmitter. The origin was an empty point on the maps, a sector abandoned for generations. What led us there was not duty, but the morbid curiosity that arises after months of routine. And so, we condemned everyone on board. The target appeared on the scanners long before it was visible through the viewports. A large structure, of obsolete design, spinning slowly in the void like a slumbering cetacean. The identification system took long seconds to process the profile, and when it did, a cold disbelief paralyzed the bridge. It was the Mayflower, the legendary colony ship, disappeared on its maiden voyage to Proxima Centauri b, 240 years ago. It should not have been there. It could not be. But there it was, intact, its immaculate hull reflecting the faint light of a distant star, without a scratch, without a sign of decay or collision. It looked like it had left the shipyard yesterday. The protocol for lost ships is clear: quarantine and remote inspection. But the Mayflower was an icon, a legend. Excitement overrode protocol. We docked with the emergency port, an act of profanation, a violation of an interstellar tomb. The pressurization was perfect. The lights in the docking tunnel came on smoothly, powered by an energy that should not have lasted centuries. The air we breathed upon entering was not the stench of decomposition or the mold of centuries of isolation. It was clean, circulated, as if the life support systems had never been shut down. The interior was a terrifyingly perfect museum. Everything was in place, immaculate, from the control panels with their analog buttons to the photographs of family members stuck with magnetic tape to the lockers. And then we found the crew. They were at their stations, in the corridors, in the cabins, frozen in natural poses, as if surprised by a single instantaneous moment of paralysis. Their faces were calm, serene, their chests rising and falling with a slow, deep breath. They were not dead. They were asleep, preserved in a sleep that had lasted centuries. Dr. Fiona, our onboard physician from Boston, was fascinated. Her instruments detected no sign of disease or cellular degradation. It was a miracle, a scientific marvel. I, on the other hand, felt only a deep cold, a sensation that we were intruders in a place that did not belong to our flow of existence. It was the systems engineer, a pragmatic man from Seattle named Edward, who noticed the first anomaly. The clocks on the Mayflower, all of them, from the main panels to the wrist chronometers on the slumbering crew, were stopped at the exact same time, the time recorded for the ship's last distress signal 240 years ago. Time inside that metal had not flowed. It was stuck, frozen in a single moment of anguish. As Edward examined a terminal, trying to access the logs, a dead screen suddenly turned on, showing not data, but a cascade of geometric symbols that folded in on themselves, patterns that hurt the eyes and confused the mind. He recoiled, pale, and at that exact moment, I swear I saw, for a fraction of a second, a figure moving at the end of a dark corridor. It was Edward, but it was not. His posture was different, more hunched, his movement spasmodic, and his eyes, when the light hit them, were wide open, not with serenity, but with pure, silent panic. It blinked and was gone. Edward's theory, formulated in a voice desperately trying to maintain rationality, was that the Mayflower was not lost in space, but out of its temporal anchor. It had torn the fabric of time and gotten stuck in the fold, a fixed point of reality in an ocean of temporality. And its preservation mechanism, whatever it was not content to merely maintain what was inside. It recorded, like a cosmic camera obscura, the temporal energy of any new visitor. And then, in its timeless solitude, it replicated them. The first copies were sighted outside, floating in the vacuum. They were us, the crew of the Vigil, but distorted, our features blurred like an image in a foggy mirror, our pressure suits faded and unreal. They moved in an uncoordinated manner, beating against the hull, against the windows, their mouths opening in screams we could not hear, but whose desperation was a physical vibration in the air. They wanted in. They wanted our place. They were echoes, degenerate temporal impressions, trapped in an eternal loop in an adjacent dimension, struggling to enter our solid reality to replace the originals. The ship was not a tomb, it was a ghost factory, a trap that used human nostalgia and curiosity as bait. Now, the real danger is not the figures outside. The danger is what has already been done to us. By entering, we were registered. Our doubles already exist, trapped in that limbo, suffering for subjective centuries in loops of the few minutes of our arrival. And every minute we spend here, our temporal signature strengthens, and the barrier between us and them weakens. We began to see them inside the ship, always in the corner of the eye, always hiding behind a corner, their forms becoming progressively more solid, more defined, more desperate. They whisper, not with words, but with a mental pressure that is a distorted reflection of our own thoughts, a whisper of primordial anguish and envy. And it is here that I need you, listening to this recording in the safety of your world, to understand the full extent of our plague. You think this is just a story, a narrative to send a shiver down your spine on a dark night. But the act of you listening, of you processing these words and visualizing the horrors I describe, creates a resonance. The Mayflower does not exist only in space, it exists as a concept, a virus in reality. By understanding its nature, you, even infinitesimally, are acknowledging its possibility. And that acknowledgement is a cracked door. Be careful of what you see in the corner of your eye, especially when you are alone, at night. That quick movement in the gloom, that reflection in the window pane that seems to last an instant too long, that whisper you attribute to the wind. It might not be your imagination. It might be an echo from a place where time does not flow, trying to find a crack to get in. The trap does not need a physical ship to exist, it only needs the idea of it, and now I have planted that idea in your mind. We will try to return to the vigil. We will try to undock and flee this floating curse. But I know, with a certainty that freezes my soul, that no matter where we go, we will carry its temporal signature with us. And somewhere, in a fold of reality we cannot perceive, our copies are already waiting, beating against the glass of a reality that is not theirs, wishing, with a will that transcends death, to trade places with us. The Mayflower was never lost. It was fishing, and we, fools that we are, took the bait.